and with my colleague Ryan Hawk, we're working on putting together this session that's looking at world history topics. So I'm very pleased to announce my friend and colleague Nick Wellington, who is about to give this presentation on the hybrid classroom. A couple of words about Nick. This is his 9th year of teaching, and this year he's stepped away from the classroom for a little while to be the coordinator for the International Baccalaureate program at Edmonds Woodway High School, which, Nick, is the school that you graduated from. So your life has gone full circle in some way.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nick has been a great colleague to work with, someone who's very dedicated and who goes the extra mile for his students. So last year he had a particularly challenging set of students with a range of abilities. And one of the things that he really dove into was figuring out how can I best meet the needs of this very broad range of students, which included a sheltered group of English language learners. So I'm very pleased to welcome Nick to this conference. And just a brief reminder, please stay on at the end of the session because we also have a bonus video, which is an interview with Nate Bowling, former Washington State Teacher of the Year, who is now working in Abu Dhabi and dealing with a combination of online, hybrid, and in-person learning at that school. So Nick, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Gordon. I appreciate that. And just a reminder, if you do have your microphone on, if you want to mute it for the moment, just so I don't hear myself echo in all of your rooms right now, just double check that you have your mic off. Before we kind of get started today, I want to make sure we address our land acknowledgement, which we've been trying to make a pretty steady practice in our school district. And it reads, we are on the traditional homelands, especially where I am, of the Duwamish, Skokomish, Nahomish, Snoqualmie, and Suquamish and other Coast English tribes. Coast tribes granted the use of the land to the U.S. via the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855 while retaining their past, present, and future rights to the land. By acknowledging these homelands, we are also committing to working with tribal nations to further the education aims they have identified in our classrooms and schools. And no matter where you are, there's a link at the bottom I've included if you'd like to discover like the lands that are being currently occupied of Indigenous lands. Native-land.ca is a really interactive map to see internationally what traditional tribal lands you may be occupying at the moment. Our presentation is going to be pretty straightforward. My hope, really the big outcome, is that you can use something. You can take bits and pieces. This is not a package deal, and maybe it might inspire a different way to approach your online instruction, and as we transition potentially to hybrid, some in-person and online instruction. My hope is that this will help you because we don't know what we don't know, and if I've kind of done a test of this this last year, and I kind of want to give you my take. Gordon has already done a good job of introducing me, and I'm going to make sure just to kind of show you again, but this is the link of any thing that I referenced today. This will take you to the resource folder. So this is the bit.ly link, and I'll reference it again. And I'll put it in the chat as well, just because I know when I'm in a conference, I like to look at resources while I'm listening. And so I've kind of put together a bunch of documents together that you can steal, modify, whatever you want to do. I mean, we got to work together now to make sure we can kind of reach our students. Just make sure we can send everybody in the meeting. There we go. So you should that should work for you all. If it doesn't, please let me know and I'll update it. So again, this is kind of my contact information. Yeah, I'm the current IB coordinator at Edmonds Woodway High School, and National Board Certified in Social Studies. And I've really taken a liking to technology in the classroom. Not so much that it has replaced everything in what I do, but I used it in a way to reach my students because paper is very friendly and it does not run out of battery. So I'm not full swing in either way. I try to use a balance. My whole presentation is based around a model I used, I discovered through the Modern Classrooms project. And this is a website if you are interested in hybrid instruction, you have to go here because they have instructional videos, templates, anything you could possibly want and learn about. They have it here, and they've actually expanded They're professional development resources. They're based in DC, and I've really enjoyed the work that they've produced so far. So everything, no affiliation, but everything I've used in this, for the most part, is kind of inspired by what Modern Classrooms has developed. Again, I want to reiterate, I want you to see this presentation is very much like a customer review. And so I'm kind of giving you a Consumer Reports perspective on how to potentially do this hybrid instruction model. So that's how I kind of want you to see this. And if you haven't looked at the Haribo sugar-free customer reviews, you have to on Amazon. Our school is planning on using this model when we go into that hybrid. So this is the Edmonds School District hybrid model. And I looked at this and I thought, oh, what I did this year could really work. And is the volume going in and out? I'm sorry if that's happening. I'll try to, maybe it's interference from some other people. But I saw this model and I thought, wow, what I did in the spring of 2020 could really work here, where we're going to have half of our students in classes, half of them at home. We have a Wednesday off day, and then we switch the classes. So many schools kind of have this AABB hybrid model. So depending on what your school is doing, this could be really helpful. So as Gordon mentioned, my classrooms, this last year, I had a sheltered English language students, about 9 who are level 1, maybe advanced early level 2. 50% of the classes, the students I had had learning needs, 504 IEP, processing, social emotional issues that they were managing. Several students I had were experiencing homelessness or in transition, and really this was a group of students with about an average GPA of 2.4 coming into the school year. So academics may not have come naturally to them. So I had students all over the place, and I could not meet the students where they were with how I was teaching them, kind of teaching them at the same pace. And I kind of went through this timeline of existential crisis and really questioning my profession. I looked for answers, and this was about 6 weeks into the school year. I did my first lesson on transatlantic slavery, tried a couple more with empires, and then by my last unit of the semester was completely flipped. And by March, our school shut down, and my students luckily were very much used to this flipped model. So it was actually kind of beneficial for them in an unfortunate sense that they knew how to interact with the flip model, and it kind of naturally helped them stay engaged. My process is not unlike anyone else's, right? We go through some sort of backwards planning, UBD style, and using my content and pedagogical expertise. I've identified a lot of accessible online resources. My goal in presenting this to you is to give you permission to use other people's work in order to spend more time working with your students. And I think we have this pride in us, especially maybe new teachers as well, that we have to create everything from ground up, and that's just not the reality that we're in. And I'm always, what's really centered in my mind is like, what's best for students, and I want to make sure I have material that's ready for them. I'm getting enough sleep. I'm a father of twin toddlers, and I don't have time to create everything. Documents take a long time to look aesthetically pleasing and navigate, and there are people out there that are better at it and have already done it, and so why can't I use it too, like well within copyright and everything. So I've listed a bunch of resources that I've used to use in this hybrid model. And then I'm able to create content and adapt materials to this model that I use. So the question is, what is the model? So it's made up of 3 parts. There is one part blended instruction, where there is content recorded by teacher-created videos. There is a pace in which students access the unit of study. And then it's really focused on mastery-based grading, where students progress when they demonstrate mastery. They can move on to the next lesson if they show me that they understand that content and skills of the previous lesson. So again, not revolutionary. This is very much what a flipped model looks like. Yeah, and all of these resources I will post again in the chat. Let's see if I have it here. looks like. I'll post it again as I kind of move through, because I am on a little bit of a tight schedule. For the sake of kind of consistency, I'm going to start in the middle and work my way around this model and show you kind of just what it looks like. So students learn at their own pace within each unit of study. And if you're a world history teacher, you've probably taught some sort of revolutions unit and enlightenment in some way, shape, or form. And so this is what students get at the beginning of a unit, and they get a fully fleshed out unit and timeline of every lesson and objective that they'll learn. So they'll learn about what the unit assessment is, when they need to get their lessons done, what objectives they're accomplishing, when they should be getting each lesson done. There's a target date. This is where the bulk of your time in this framework really is laid down. Is really thinking about what's my end date, my beginning and end date, and it looks like someone's mic's on. Thanks. And so this is what students first engage with. This is like the cover sheet of the unit. And so you have to be very, very clear about your expectations. And of course, these are not necessarily hard dates, but give students a sense of parameter and boundary. I was able to create a unit around revolution, and I was able to include in-class discussions around political correctness and the Enlightenment. There are ways in which you can have seminar discussions. It's all about how you want to engage with your students at any given time. So it's not this hard, fast structure, but you'll notice the components of this are simple introductory lessons, really clear expectations of objectives, warm-up questions for them to consider. So this is kind of what students see in the beginning. Every day a student enters the classroom, they do a warm-up sheet. And this is what I really love about it, because it's the moment in which I can truly connect with my students on that kind of social emotional level. They can write their name, their date, and tell me, what are they working on for the day? Are they taking notes, classwork, or are they finishing up the lesson, right? And then they can kind of self-assess. I think this is what students sometimes are not always used to, is that they need to metacognitively think about, where am I in my learning? Rather than me telling you, they have the independence to look at, oh, I'm on 3.2 today. I'm working on my notes. And so this was the hardest hurdle for a lot of students, is instead of me telling them what to do, they had to do the thinking for themselves. I asked them to put the objectives in their own words, right? What do they think they're going to be learning today? They answer a question tied to it, and they just give me kind of a goal. They imagine, what do they think they can accomplish today? And again, this took lots of practice, right? I suggest some strategies, especially our students who get distracted. Obviously, they want to do well, but they get in their own way. So I even suggest some strategies about how can they get their work done. And then they give me a little sense of like how they're doing. I collect these one by one, meet with the students, and I'm really able to kind of engage with them and kind of talk to them about what's going on with their life. Yeah, this weather check has been really fun for me to hear about them, and just like, it's surprising what they will circle and tell you about just because you gave them this option. So this is, if you could integrate anything into your daily practices, if you're doing a unit like this, I love this warm-up sheet. And again, this is in the folder of resources. The next piece, as we looked at this quickly, the self-paced structure, I want to talk about the blended instruction, because this is where, so Mary's asking about when I meet with students. Within the first 5 minutes, in order for them to move on to like their lesson of the day, they have to get a check off from me first. So I make sure I connect with every single student. So in that class, I had about 33 students. So you have to be really on it to get around and kind of quick connect and then move on. So the next piece, for this model, like we looked at self-paced and then the blended instruction, and this is where some people are going to be a little scared, because they have to listen to their own voice, they have to record themselves, they have to create presentations, and I don't want you to die on this hill and spending all of your time here, but because it's easier than you think. The blended instruction is really meant, it's a didactic form, right? We are lecturing. It replaces the in-person lecture. You can be anywhere, anytime in a student's life now. They don't have to be in class. You can break down complex readings and condense them. I've done that a lot. If there was a reading I knew was going to be really complex, I kind of just broke it up into slides and read it to them and explain aspects of it. You can also integrate really good audio and video clips that they can watch at their own pace. And so this was really, really an epiphany for me, because I had students who were unhoused and didn't quite know where they were going to be each night, and they might be gone for a couple days. But the moment they step back into my classroom, I no longer had a stress response to, oh my gosh, what did they miss? I can say, oh, you ended on 3-2. Here you go. And they were just immediately welcomed back into the classroom. So it really helped me not get frustrated for not seeing a kid, but I knew exactly what they needed, because I had already had it all planned out. They knew exactly where they needed to be, and they sat down and were able to connect back into the class and feel purposeful. And that's what I really liked about this, especially if you have students who struggle just to come to school, right? You don't have to find all the resources. It's already loaded for them to engage in. So every flipped lesson comes with these component parts. And some of it's going to be really obvious. The lesson name and objective. Some sort of lesson question. What are you trying to answer today? It's in student-friendly language. Some sort of hook activity. A video clip, something to maybe a political cartoon, a timeline. A brief real world example, or an interactive. The sky's the limit based on what you want to do. So a lot of visual literacy can be done in the hook activity. The next important piece is the key issue. These are the kind of the non-negotiables you want students to walk away with. Think of them as assertions, right? If we're going to bring in some literacy skills, right? It comes in the form of an assertion. And so for every key issue, your subsequent slides are going to have bullet points that kind of support whatever you're trying to show them. And I'm going to show you some examples today. So those are the kind of component parts of a flipped lesson. And I've included in the resources instructional of how to set up your slides. So it's very logical and sequenced for students, because there's a natural beginning, middle, and end. At the end of your lesson, you revisit and direct them to the key issues that you visited today. And okay, now that you know this information, could you answer the lesson question for the day? That's kind of part of the assignment. A lot of my my blended instruction in my videos was very much inspired by the work done by New Visions for Public Schools. And this is what I want to impart upon you. Many of you are probably familiar with this, but if you have not, our department loves this for a variety of reasons. They do very good document creation via Google, and it really cut down on the time I had to take to create the lessons in digital documents. So I cannot say enough about this organization, and I really respect the work that they've done. They helped me reach my students more because I wasn't burned out creating the documents. Okay, and I'm going to show you some examples of what I've used. So you've created the content video. Great. What's next? Okay, so with the content video, you're going to create a note guide, something simple, organization, no more than 2 pages, like a page front and back. So now that they've gotten the base content, now let's kind of engage them for more critical thinking skills. And that's where you ask them to do an activity, right? So for every lesson, we have a video that they watch and take notes. They have some sort of skill practice or something to deepen their knowledge on whatever you want to teach them. And then you give them this exit ticket. It requires them to use their notes and their activity to show that they've mastered the content or skills. And this is actually what I'm grading. I don't grade the note guides. I don't grade the activities. You know why? If they can't answer the exit ticket, it tells me that their notes or their activities weren't done well. And this is where I can kind of help them. I can pinpoint. Okay. So for example, and I'm going to show you some examples of what each component looks like. You need to find a good screencasting piece of technology. I've used Screencast-O-Matic. They have a pretty affordable individual user plan for educators, and it's one that I've kind of gone to time and time again. There are a variety out there. explaineverything.com is another one. The user difficulty is a little higher with that one. So if you're looking to find something to record your screen, this is a really great one. So here's a sample of a video I recorded for the French Revolution. Yeah, and if you have other samples or other tools that you've used, please let me know or tell in the chat, because there are so many out there. A lot of tech companies have capitalized on this distance learning model and put out tools. Let's see if this will work for me. I uploaded a file, but of course it's not working. Right. Take it out of this really quickly and show you kind of a video I have done. Kind of knew that wasn't going to work. So all my videos are housed in Screencast-O-Matic online. Okay, here we go. And I've included
welcome to lesson 3.
This, but this is, I want you to notice the structure of this presentation today. And this is on looking at the preconditions to the French Revolution. So hopefully y'all can hear this as you kind of read through.
10. Social, economic, and political issues facing France. Our lesson question for today reads, what were the social, economic, and political issues that led to the French Revolution? Reminder for notes, this should take you no more than 25 minutes. When you see blue, you write in the appropriate box on your note guide.
So notice I'm being really declarative with what I want from them. I'm having a lot of visual stimulus of like when they're writing.
To start off this lesson, we're going to consider a little bit of our own thinking about revolt, revolution, and government. So one thing I want you to think about and see if you can come up with 2 to 3 ideas of what issues in society might cause people to revolt against their government.
So here's my introductory hook activity. Here is my key issue. Here's a part of my key issue. It's at the top. So it's exactly what I want to prove to them. I want to show them that French society and class structure focus most of the power into the hands of the very few.
Landowners and people with high status in society, and commoners.
I had in my vocab review in this French Revolution unit, students could not define these 3 terms. So it's something that I realized as I was doing my instruction. And so I made sure to really hit my vocabulary again and again and again as I was talking through my lectures in this flipped model. So you'll see that each slide, I'm able to, I have a touch screen for my laptop, so I'm able to write on my screen and really draw attention to things I want them to see. I'm just using PowerPoint for my presentation tool, so it's nothing crazy, but you'll see that I'm able to highlight and reinforce specific terms and answers as I move through. If you are a little bit more technically savvy, you can include
were really expensive. She was an
and so you can really set up your slide to kind of help enhance what you're trying to show them, okay? And talk through images. And this is where your expertise and content knowledge comes in. You'll see at the end the key issues that I've revisited with them. And then I get to kind of talk to them about what their activity is going to be. So all of these lessons, or at least one of these lessons, is included in the resources I've given you. And so you'll be able to review them and kind of take stock in how to set up one for yourself. The Modern Classrooms project also has probably 4 or 5 different samples of exemplars on how to do it as well. So if you don't necessarily like the style that I've done it in, you can see how other teachers have done it. So like I've said, The note guide I've created, and I've included all of the note guides I've created for this unit, is pulled from a lot of the New Visions curriculum. This is what we kind of do together. This is their page that they have with them. And it's bullet point notes. It's nothing outside of the ordinary. The next piece, and what I really like out of New Visions curriculum is the exit ticket, this concept of like, how do I know that they learned any content? And what they have done really well, and this is what Chris Reichdahl was talking about, is this concept of literacy instruction in social studies. And one thing I've really glommed onto and really have incorporated into my teaching instruction is the use of just teaching writing and history. And so what New Visions has done really well is just helping them write really concise, cogent, and evidence-based sentences, right? And so here's an example where I give them some words to include in their sentence. I wanted them to expand this sentence. All right, this is a pretty bland one. So social, economic, and political issues led to the French Revolution. We could make this better. Maybe we could expand this sentence a little bit. So I have them look through their notes and think about, what else could I add? What else could I add here? And this was a really good test for me to say, yeah, this kid understands. He's using words like bourgeoisie. He's using words like the Estates General. He's getting a sense. He's talking about the French debt. So you're giving them some scaffolds here and giving them structure to show me what they know. And I think this is what was a huge relief for me, because I was like, yes, this is an appropriate show of evidence, right? I'm not grading 4 assignments for one lesson. I'm grading one thing per lesson. So as I imagined this whole kind of flow, that students could be working on their lessons, my group B students could be working on their lessons at home, and I could be providing for my group A students a lot of in-person help with their notes, their activities, and exit tickets. I can kind of check in with them. When we swap, I would do the same thing for my group B students. So you could use this model and not have to create 2 sets of lessons for your in-person instruction and your at-home instruction. It's all the same, but they're working at their own pace. They're either working on their notes, they're working on their activity, or their exit ticket. And I knew students really benefited from this, especially my introverted ones who really liked the ability to kind of work at their own pace. My students that got distracted really easily, they knew what they needed to do because I laid it out all for them. As I reflect on this, there's some opportunities and pitfalls, just like with any instructional model. This is not a panacea. So what I really liked about this is that I could actually provide true individual support to my students, because each student was at a different point of their learning based on the pace that they wanted to work at. And I loved that. I never felt like that before when I taught everyone at the same pace. My EL students, I could really modify. I did a lot of translanguaging of using English and Spanish because I had predominantly Spanish speakers. I had one DHH student, I had some level 3 ELs, so I could modify just enough. I could take some content away. I worked with my English language teacher as well to modify and adjust the schedule, not expecting them to produce the same amount as their native English speaking peers. It really forced me to plan ahead with greater intention. I was so much more organized, and I didn't have to scramble and figure out what I was going to do because I spent the time to create it. Grading goes really quickly. I'm not grading every assignment. I'm grading the mastery. Do they understand the content of whatever I wanted them to listen? What I kind of liked that there were periods of quiet and activity during the week. So there was this nice kind of flow of energy that kids could express and also focus. Students who were sick or gone for extended periods of times could reintegrate into the class like I talked about before without really any resistance or stumbling. They just kind of knew what to do once we had kind of trained the system. And that's what I was really, that made my heart feel good, because you never feel like you're doing enough for your students, especially those who have external factors in their lives. Let me go backwards. A couple pitfalls that I did notice is that there were periods of students just staring at their screens. And for a teacher like me who has a pretty active classroom, I got really uncomfortable because what should I be doing at this point? If they're all starting on the same lesson, they're all watching the video of me talking to them, And so that was a hard adjustment for me, especially in the beginning of it. The do now entry task used a lot of paper. And so it was hard to get every student when they were ready. So this was a thing that I worked out using both digital versions of the do now entry task, but I still highly recommend it. Time, investment, and frustration recording the videos, organization and content creation. It's once you get used to it, it goes a lot smoother because you're kind of, did I have every video recorded for the unit? No, I was trying to be at least 3 to 4 videos ahead of my students. I was kind of not necessarily building the ship as we were sailing in it, but giving myself some grace and helping students. Because I did have kids that were 2, 3 lessons ahead of where they were supposed to be. They were just really feeling this way of doing work. So it kind of kept me accountable to it as well. Depending on your style of teaching, you might feel like you want to do more and have more activity in your classroom. So again, this is one way to do it. For some, it might feel just uncomfortable at first. You may not like it because students are just kind of working at their own pace. But I found opportunities to do discussions and debates based on what they were doing. So they all had to be ready for a debate at a certain time. So I was able to get a lot of interaction at points. It just wasn't consistent. So that's my kind of walkthrough of my hybrid learning model that you could potentially apply in the future or use parts of it now. There's no reason why you can't use it now. If you do have questions, this is the time. I'm going to post this is the link that of resources that you can go to that I've included for any possible notes, activities, videos that you'd want to look at a later date. Am I currently in a hybrid model or online only? So Edmonds Way and the Edmonds School District is all online. So we meet our students in 2 different kind of groups. We're on a odd even schedule. So Mondays and Thursdays we see our 1 through 5. Tuesdays and Fridays we see our 2, 4, 6. So it will change, right? It will definitely change for students, and I feel like this could potentially benefit some teachers in how they teach. So that's how it would potentially apply. How do you do entry tasks then? So DP Clover Park, if you could clarify, that would be awesome. If you want to turn on your mic and ask the question, I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah, so I like the video. I like what you've been saying so far. So I think I'm just trying to maybe do some changes and incorporate this a little bit.
Sure.
So I see how in the hybrid model you would do the entry tasks if students were there in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess specifically, how are the entry tasks being handled in the online only version?
Yeah, so I think what you can do, what I've done in Canvas is I either do like a Google form, because this is easily applicable to Google form. Or just like you create an assignment in Canvas. This is the learning management system we use. And so that's how I would do it, or I'd connect with students via chat. That would be the 2 ways, because you would see the entries come in live. You can connect with students, especially if you see something out of the ordinary and you want to kind of connect. So that's what I would anticipate. Yeah, that's a great question. And so again, here's the link to the resource list and a link to that those entry tasks that you were just asking about. And it may not work, right? It may not work exactly. So you're always able to adapt it to your students. Any other questions before we kind of transition to the recorded video?
Nick, I wonder if someone is feeling this is too much to wrap their arms around all at once. Is there one part you would say, here's an easy starting place?
So I think that's a great question, because I was so desperate to reach my students, but I'm like, I cannot create a whole unit right now. I can't do it. So start with 1, right? So so here's the link to the floor, by the way. Oh, that was too important. So what I did, kind of, if we went back to my timeline, is I started with 1 lesson. I wanted to teach about transatlantic slavery, really intentionally. So you know what I was going to do? I was going to create 1 video. I was going to create 1 activity, and then I was going to create 1 exit ticket. And I really talked to my students. I'm like, how is this going for you? What did you like about it? What didn't work for you? So that's something that I just try it once and see how it feels. And that's what I did. If I wanted to kind of go back to that model that timeline I used, because I was really scared to do it because it was totally different from how I taught for 8 years prior to that, right? That's not how I taught, but I was so desperate to get to my students. So this is where I had my panic attack. I was looking for answers and I tried one lesson and it worked. And then so I tried a couple more and then I took a deep dive. So that's what I recommend for anyone trying this out for the first time. And it's not going to be perfect. I think the best advice I got when recording videos is never re-record it if you trip up in your videos. You want that natural flow, and if you are tripping on your words a bit, let that come through. Let it be kind of natural, just like you would in the classroom. We're never perfect in the classroom either. So give yourself some grace when you are recording your videos. If you were unintelligible, obviously stop and start over, but let it kind of just come out naturally, whatever comes to you. Because I wasn't always I'm not a big lecturer, but it got me used to it.
Other question in the
Yeah,
chat.
so I do have some models of I saw someone talking about modifications of scaffolds, and I have some of my ELL examples in there with Spanish, as well as I think the modifications and scaffolds that I've provided, if I talk about this, this exit ticket in particular, I would provide language that I'd want to see from them, or I put in sentence stems. So that's a really easy modification. So if a student didn't know how to answer this question, how did this event help the French people meet their revolutionary goals? I would type into this document, one way this document does X, Y, and Z is, and I might give them some vocab words. Just some basic kind of ELL modifications is helpful for any student. So I'd like to give a lot of structure to show them exactly what I want them to use. And the New Visions curriculum does a really good job of providing different scaffolds as well. What else do we got here? Navigating the chat here. Do you have any tips for students who submit assignments verbally recording? And I think that's a great option. I think if you can give them, here's an example of, they could present their answer to this task verbally. They could just record themselves instead of writing it out. I think that's a really, really good idea. So can you tell me verbally, based on what you learned so far, was the French Revolution successful? Right? I think that's a great option. So in Canvas, I know students can record themselves and submit their comments. Canvas and how do I use it? I liked Canvas for what it is. I even posted my entire class. So if you are a Canvas user, you should be able to access my classroom and see how I set it up. So I thought it worked pretty well. I didn't have any big problems. Videos should be, and this was the hard part for me, videos really shouldn't go beyond that 10-15 minute mark. That's kind of the suggestion for each concept you're really trying to get at. And so depending on what I was trying to teach, I really tried to keep that 15-minute mark because it didn't just got too long. It was simply too long for students. I might as well have broken it up, and I did that with a couple concepts. So that's my recommendation. So Joanna, that's a great question. Your student engagement is significantly improved. Yes, I was getting about 30% turn-in rate before this. And then I was able to get upwards of 75 to 80%, especially in the beginning of the unit, depending on what was going on in the student's life. But it was never a question, and I really liked this. It was never a question where the student was. I always knew where they were in their learning. I never had to guess because we would go look it over together and say, where are you at? Oh, I'm right here. They could point to it. And I think there was something really powerful. Especially if you're talking with families who have a child that has significant processing or learning issues, you can show this to them and say, this is how I've laid it out. And I've got just really great reviews from parents like, thank you so much. This is really clear. I know exactly where my child needs to go next, right? It's kind of giving them that map, which we just don't always do. One last question. Yes. Any last questions? Yeah, for the high flyers, will you work ahead? Do you have the whole course set out for them? And so like I said, I try to be around 4 to 5 lessons ahead. So I invest some time in recording videos and making sure. And I challenge them in their class activities and exit tickets to have them go back and refine their work. I know that they could write better than this or add more detail. So that's where you can kind of maybe like slow them down a bit to really expand their writing skills and say like, no, I think there's another way we could approach this, or lead them to another resource to include. So that is always the fear, right? Is that, oh no, I don't have enough content. Or you just give them a break. That was something that I think we're all learning. Like, what if this student just got to relax in class because they have just worked so far ahead? Let them relax, let them listen to music, or help another student. That was another thing we did. So last question, there we go. Okay, Gordon, it's all you.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. You packed in a lot of information. Thank you for sharing all of your resources. And folks, if you are not certain about where those resources are, they're in the chat. And Nick has also shared his Canvas page if you want to pull things from there. And the resources that he is relying on a great deal were the New Visions curriculum. And you can just Google that.
Which we all can attest to. They're just great.
Great.
Save us so much time.
All right, folks, I hope you'll stick around for the next 15 minutes or so, because we have a presentation from Nate Bowling, who is currently teaching in Abu Dhabi and grappling with many of the issues that we are grappling with in Washington State, the US, and maybe even parts of Canada. Anyway, I'm going to share with you the video that we recorded with Nate about a week ago. Nate, of course, is on a different time zone. It's, I think, 11 hours different from the Pacific Northwest at this time of year. So Nate agreed to a recorded session. So here it is. Nick, I think, let's see. Let's see if I can share the screen here. And of course, you never have the thing just where you want it. So let me try that again. All right, so enjoy this video, and the final lunch presentation begins at 12 o'clock. So I think we can squeeze this in, give you time to take a quick drink or a quick break, and still get back for the final keynote. So can you tell us a little bit about the range of classes that you have?
Yeah, so here in Abu Dhabi, last spring, we were like everybody else, went remote. And we started off the school year remote. And then in mid-September, because we started in August, we came back in person. And so I'm teaching my 5 classes, a mix of in-person and remotely. So I have 2 periods of 9th grade global studies, which is kind of a general social studies class. And then I have 3 periods of either comparative politics or US government politics, which are all in person. But within those in-person classes, I have some students who are at home. And so I have a mix of in-person classes, remote students in in-person classes, and students who are still at home.
What do you think is the biggest challenge of having a hybrid model or remote model? Is it about trimming what you can cover?
So for me, like, teaching is relational, and like my class is very conversation based. Like I have a kind of philosophy thing that like whoever in the classroom is doing the talking is doing the thinking. And so I want students engaging in co-generative dialogue. That's harder to manage online. Like it's doable, but harder to manage online. And so the hardest part for me is trying to maintain, so like the students who are in person, our rapport and relationship is accelerating very quickly. The students who are remote, I still feel like I know them, but I don't know them as well as I should know them or want to know them. And so like building that community when like some folks aren't present is really difficult. Actually my school sprung for an omnidirectional microphone, like a conference microphone. And so I have an omnidirectional mic in the middle of the classroom. And so I constantly direct students to speak toward the microphone for the benefit of students who aren't there. Conversely, with my remote classes, it just slows pacing way down. Like you cannot move at the same pace you move in person, and frankly shouldn't try to.
So what advice do you have for teachers who are having to work remotely in terms of getting students engaged? What seems to work for you?
Yeah, well, so I would say the answer depends on whether you have an external assessment. Because in my classes where I have an external assessment, my answer is different than classes where it's just like within our building. And so in my class within our building, our global studies class, my thing is slow down. and make sure students are talking, make sure, so it's my goal to have every student speak out loud to the entire class at least once class period. And so I'll pose a series of questions, I'll give them some private reasoning time, and then I will basically like ask folks to respond in the queue to like which question they want. So like, for example, last week we were talking about the effectiveness of the United Nations. And so there were 5 discussion questions. Each student put the number they wanted to talk about. And so then I would call, okay, all the number 1s share out, all the number 2s share out, and then students can add in the chat. They can either put a comment there, or they can put an exclamation point for I want to interject, or a question mark for I want to ask a question. And so it's my goal to get every student in class, in every class period remote, talking at least once a class period, hopefully twice, even more if possible, but like time is limited.
And have you begun to see that level of engagement? Is it beginning to change?
No, I have. I made a pitch to students that like, and I think it's important for teachers to like own the moment right now. Like this is not what any of us went to school for. I have 15 years of teaching experience, but 0 years of this experience. I think it's important to own that in front of students and to say that like, this is not normal. We're not living in normal times, and that we need to approach this in a different manner. And my students, for the most part, have stepped up to the challenge. Like I know a lot of teachers I've seen online are like fighting the camera thing. I don't fight the camera thing too much. And like, I really don't care if your camera's on or off, as long as when I call on them, they can engage in the conversation. I think that this is making me remember like what are the core elements of my classroom practice that make teaching matter, and it's making me basically cut the fluff.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean cut the fluff?
For sure. So I think about when I do data entry and like evaluate work. So traditionally in a classroom, I would stand at the front door and greet students and do a cursory check over their homework and make sure their homework was done so they can come into the classroom and engage in the conversation. Using an online tool like Google Classroom, all of a sudden that cursory check requires 6, 7, 8 clicks per student and becomes more time consuming. And so essentially, if it's not important enough for me to like actually review it and assess it, I'm not assigning it. And so like I will assign students writing and have them do like annotations in Google Documents or in like Google Classroom, but like I'm assigning, I want to say it thoughtfully, I've never been a fan of busy work, but like I basically have reduced my homework that I'm assigning to students, or like out of classroom work to the bare minimum where there hardly is any outside of the classroom work. And it's definitely not busy work. It's essential to what we're doing the next day.
So really what you're describing is a mindset that teachers must take. We have to shift our mindset.
No, for sure. Well, and the thing is, like I mentioned before, externally such classes, like, so in my AP classes, it's different. And so like my approach there is I'm obligated and have a responsibility to the students to make it through the curriculum. And so there are some experiential and experimental things that I might do otherwise that just aren't going to happen in an online environment. And I have to make peace with that. There are always depth versus breadth trade-offs in a classroom, particularly in social studies. And I would say that I'm more cognizant this year of those trade-offs.
And what about, what advice would you offer to teachers in terms of giving themselves a break, taking care of themselves? What approach are you taking?
Yeah, there's so many like cliches about self-care that I think about. And like in the past, I've been not dismissive, but like about them. But like, it's really true. You cannot take care of your students if you aren't taking care of yourself. Like the old cliche about like put on your own mask first before putting the mask on the person with you is really, really important. Like teachers have to take care of themselves. If you as a teacher are not taking care of your own basic needs and your own life needs, if you're not mentally well, then you can't be there for your students. And so this is a year where like sometimes you need to turn work off. And I think more than ever, so if I think about my work schedule, traditionally I have basically taught and then come home and work a couple of hours and then like had like a half day every weekend of work, adding 6 hours of work on Sunday afternoon. Here, because we have an Islamic calendar, my Sunday is Saturday, but like I'm being much more intentional about like I'm not bringing work home and doing work at this time. And so for me, our weekend here is Friday, Saturday. I refuse to touch anything school related on Friday. Refuse. And I won't start working on school stuff till Saturday about 6 p.m. And then I'll do like a 6 to 10 shift. But like that's my compartmentalization. That's what works for me. That may not work for you. I think everybody needs to figure out like what are their boundaries they need in place and what are the things they need to keep themselves sane and like abide by those. And I would also say that like this is a time where like we need to make sure we're focused on like diet and mental health. And like a hungry teacher is a crappy teacher, right? An angry teacher is a crappy teacher. And so like, this is a time to like, make sure that you're taking care of yourself, taking care of your diet, taking care of exercise as well.
Brian, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, that's an important question for students as well. I've thought a lot about it as a teacher in terms of their social and emotional health. So I wondered if you've incorporated some of that mindset into the classes that you're teaching and the relationships you're building with your students.
No, for sure. So for the first, 5 weeks of class, we started every class with just like a human check-in, like how are you doing? How are things? What did you do to bring yourself joy? I have a kid who I won't name because I don't want to shame him, and he's really into some Tom Clancy video game. And so I would start class by asking him how many hours last night. He would say how many hours, and that became part of our routine. At some point, it was interesting. About week 5, the kids stopped me, and they're like, "Bowling, we're good. Let's just go." And so like that meant the relationship was there. One of the things that I've been really clear about in my advocacy since I got here is that like I'm aware that here I work with a privileged population, and that my students who live and work here in the Gulf, their life needs are met in a way that my students back in the States' life needs weren't met. And one of the things that I'm passionate about in my advocacy is that my students back in the US deserve the things my students here get, but don't get them because society has not deemed that necessary. And so I would say that teachers have a role, in particular during this pandemic and this moment, to be advocates for their communities, for their students. And like that's additional emotional labor, but that additional emotional labor isn't necessary for our students right now.
Hey, do you have suggestions? Another question going back to teaching strategies and content. I'm more of a project-based teacher, and so I'm just looking for creative ideas and ways to build in projects into my classrooms. And of course, now we're working in a different model. So I'm just wondering how you might approach project-based learning in terms of what you're doing in your classes right now.
Yeah, I've always found that students do the best on projects when there's an external audience. And so any project you can do that creates an external audience, then like go for it. Later on this year, my 9th graders are going to work on podcasts and do some videos, and I may or may not put those podcasts out to the public. With my upper grade classes, I've moved toward doing some collaborative documents via like shared Google Docs and Google Classroom, shared PowerPoint presentations and Google Slides presentations. And I've found that makes work completion soar, because if it's a shared cooperative document and you don't do your work, you're screwing the rest of the class. And so like the person who was assigned to like research the parliamentary system in Nigeria, well, don't use Nigeria, the parliamentary system in the UK, if they don't do that, we all open the document and see they didn't do it. And so that creates some ownership, and my students are rising to the occasion on that for sure.
Have you found certain things just don't easily translate from
Yes.
person to learning?
Yes. So in my global studies class, we typically do a model United Nations simulation. And we're in the midst of trying to figure out how to do that. Last year, and like think about timing and fortuitousness. Last year, the topic for our model United Nations was a World Health Organization conversation about infectious disease. Hello, right? And so we're right now trying to figure out how to do that and how to do like the mock debate and the aspects of that in a remote setting. And we aren't there yet. And so like the instruction that I'm engaged in, I'm trying to drive towards being project-based and being towards deliverable-based. But like there are some things that like I'm not sure how it's going to work. Like in my government class, I typically do mock Congress. Like I don't know. I don't know.
So it sounds like what you're saying is you have to give yourself permission to try something online, but also recognize, hey, it might not actually work.
Well, no, 100%. And also, like, I think it's important to be transparent with students. Like, I will say to students, this is the outcome that I'm seeking right now. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. How is this working for you? And so, like, after any task, I always have a moment of, like, to what extent did the method that I delivered this information work for you all? Give me a check-in here, here, or here. And we talk through like how it worked. And so they give me feedback that like some things just don't work. And I think this is a time more than ever for teachers to like own that like we don't have all the answers. Like it's teaching, not sorcery. And like we don't have to have all the answers. And that students know what good teaching looks like. And they know how they learn best. And this is an opportunity for us to lean on them as experts sometimes.
Many teachers, many school districts have presented lots of potential apps. And teachers are challenged with having to get up to speed with learning how to use these apps sometimes they don't work. Do you have any advice on which ones to select or whether or not to select any?
I would not dare try to make myself the app expert because my context is not your context. But what I would say to people is that like settle on 3 or 4. You can't do everything. Like you're not going to be able to whip out 17 different apps and have kids track from place to place to place. And so like my routines are pretty simple. Like I use a Kahoot in class. I use a Padlet at home. I use Socratic for assessment. And like those are like the ed apps that I'm into. Other folks in my building are mad in love with Edpuzzle. Other folks are in love with oh goodness, I'm forgetting the name of it right now. Oh, Nearpod. Those haven't worked for me. Not saying they're bad or good, but like you need to figure out what are the students. So here's one thing I think about as a teacher this year more than ever is that my students here have 8 classes. If every teacher is using 6 different apps for 8 classes, then kids are tracking and trying to keep track of 46 different logins. And like, I'm not being hyperbolic here, like it's too much, it's too much. And so like, if you're going to dive into some of the apps that are available, pick one and like make it your jam. Speaking of jam, Jamboard is a good one for collaboration as well. And so I guess my thing with this is this: educational technology is useful in a classroom, but also less is more. There is a movement in teaching to talk about the need to understand Bloom's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy. And I nod at that like Maslow-Bloom conversation that you need Maslow first for Bloom, but like that's overcomplicating it. You need to show that you care. And students and people learn from people they love. And if you can engender a feeling of hope in your students and a feeling of joy in your students when learning, then they will learn from you. And people who do not engender that feeling of love and joy, they won't work for. And one thing that I think is interesting is how honest students are about instruction in other classes. Like kids know what bad teaching looks like, and they will talk about bad online teaching to your face often. And like that to me is also a check that like, what do I want students saying about my class? And so I would just say to anybody who's watching this and a teacher right now, particularly teachers who are like younger in the profession and earlier on in their years, to like invest time in really getting to know your students as people. And if you know them as people, you can actually teach them better.
Great. Thank you so much for those words and for your great and complete answers to the earlier questions. Nate Bowling is a former Washington State Teacher of the Year, now living in Abu Dhabi. Thank you so much, Nate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate.
My pleasure.
All right, that concludes our session for the world history part of today's conference. Thank you for your presence. I hope that you got something out of it. Do remember that this has all been recorded and you can share this with your colleagues who are not able to make it to the live sessions today. And likewise, all of the resources, not only from our session, but from other sessions are available. Our goal here from the Washington State Council for Social Studies was to give you practical, useful things that you can take back to the classroom. I hope that we have met that goal. So thank you from me, Gordon Blank. And Ryan, do you want to say a farewell?
Thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. A wonderful weekend and a good start to your week.
And thank you again. Hopefully some of this can be used in your instruction or parts of it. And if you do have any questions or want to bounce ideas off me, you feel more than free to contact me. Thanks.
So give yourselves a little break, and then I hope that you'll join the final keynote speaker, who is going to get underway at about, I don't know, a couple of minutes. Thank you. Bye-bye. Joanna is asking, where can you access that? That will be put up by the Washington State Social Studies Council once today's online conference is concluded. So do a Google search for the WSCC. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Gordon.